He's almost 10.
He's almost 10. 10 and 3/4. Or 9 and 3/4.
Oh. Harry Potter.
Okay. Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? My name is Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And today we're looking at Chapter 3 of Assassin's Apprentice, Covenant.
Yes.
And Covenant meaning Shrewd's covenant with Fitz? Or do you think there are multiple meanings? It's basically a binding promise, a formal agreement.
Right. I mean, yeah, probably.
I kind of looked through the chapter a little bit and I didn't see any other ones that made sense, but quick spoiler alert, this is where we meet King Shrewd. The opening paragraphs of this is talking about the skill again.
Yes.
And where it comes from. And the Out Islanders again. And we touched on that a lot last episode.
Yes.
But I do want to say that the first line in this is that the original source of the skill will probably remain forever shrouded in mystery. And I think that's true throughout the whole series. We have some ideas of where it came from, and I know the Fool at one point says that he thinks the dragons were involved in giving it, and that's one of our main thoughts on that too.
Yeah.
But as far as I remember, the actual origins or the reasons for it don't appear anywhere in the details.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that it says that I guess it says, when the sea blood flows with the blood of the plains, the skill will blossom. And then talks about how Out Islanders and people who descended from the original people living in the Six Duchies don't have skill. It's just people who are born with both bloodlines. So that's cool. And
you can definitely see where that comes about in the royal line specifically then, because Taker came over, he was the ruler and he was an islander, so he married and had children with people of the land there, and that continued to happen, and before the blood got too diluted, the leaders of that land, the Six Duchies of Taker's bloodline, had to remarry back into the Out Islands as political marriages, and it was mentioned before that they did that multiple times, so they kept strengthening that back and forth and kept the bloodline of those two mixed fairly strong, so you can see where that skill remains strong in the royal bloodline. Because I don't think any of the normal people of the Six Duchies or the Out Islands are going to be mingling with each other too much in general, but the leaders have a reason to do so. Yeah.
I think there could be little bits where, like, we know that the Out Islanders are raiders, so there could be some illegitimate children from that.
Definitely.
Which would be why some people that aren't royal at all have the skill.
Oh, 100%. We know that there's other people that pop up along the Six Duchies. I'm just...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's explainable why the royal line has more skill users that are prevalent.
Yeah.
And we get into a little introduction again to where we left off, where Fitz had just lost Nosy, and an utter loneliness had set into his bones and into his life. And it starts off with him getting back in a rhythm and getting back to a boy's life.
Yeah.
Following Burrich around, dogging his steps. There's a paragraph here where he kind of goes over everything that he's lost that we have pretty much went over the last 2 episodes. He was separated from his mother, dragged off to a new city and climate, abandoned by his father to the care of his man, and then bereft of his puppy companion.
And did you notice that it's separated from his mother and abandoned by his father?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was forcefully removed, and then
Yeah. So doesn't put blame on his mom, even like though he's upset with her enough to give her memories away, he still doesn't blame her. she didn't abandon him.
Right.
So, I don't know. I liked that. Well, I don't know that I like that his mom was, he had to be separated from his mom, but yeah.
And a little bit later, there's something I want to go back to, but a little bit later we have a list of Burrich's losses in that time as well, and I felt like they mirrored each other. At least those paragraphs mirrored each other a little bit. As looking back, I suppose he was as lonely as I. Chivalry had not allowed Burrich to follow him to his exile. Instead, he had been left to care for a nameless bastard and found that the bastard had a penchant for what he regarded as a perversion. And his leg injury and everything like that explains. I felt like they mirrored one another in this. And it just kind of compounds in the last line of that section. It says, "Locked into loneliness were we two, and looking at one another every evening, we each saw the one we blamed for it."
That's really sad.
And Burrich kept him really busy. He only got to see Molly and his other friends once every few months, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. When he could sneak away.
Yeah, when he could sneak away, or Burrich got too drunk or got called away on an errand or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And as time passed, they kind of got used to that, and Fitz kind of fit into Burrich's life as an errand boy, as a helper.
Yeah.
And they came to depend on one another.
Yeah, and Fitz was really good at knowing what Burrich needs before he asks for it, and just generally, doing what he's supposed to, finding his role.
It is really sad that he doesn't really form attachments at all. It says there were other children in the keep about his own age, but he never really plays with them, gets to know them at all, or anything like that. And he never had any real bonds with anything.
Yeah.
Or anyone.
He does note that most of the children were not mean. They weren't cruel to him.
Just simply outside of his circle, basically. Mm-hmm. And we get a little description of the Queen and Regal.
Ugh, yeah.
Saying that the Queen always found fault with Fitz at some point or other.
And then used that as an excuse to reprimand Burrich, which is so not okay.
Queen's the worst.
She is. I just don't understand why she hates Fitz that much. I get that maybe it threatens her son's, line to the throne, but it makes me frustrated that has this much animosity towards a little kid. I
think it's still a link to chivalry and Verity, because chivalry finally stepped out and Regal could step in because she views them as nobly superior to the actual princes, and then Fitz is there just kind of being recognized by the crown and further dirtying their reputation, maybe? I'm not sure. The Queen is just very hateful in general, and raised her son in the same way, because it says Regal has finally filled out. He's grown up. He's about 21 years old now, by my estimate, and it says that he's very vindictful and petty and would just push through whatever this 9/10-year-old child found to play with, and
and also is shoving him out of the way. Dude, you're a 21-year-old
twice his age.
Yeah, maybe chill on pushing children. Ugh, I don't know, grow up maybe.
Yeah, but we do get a nice contrast in the next few lines. Verity comes back and is not always super kind to him or anything like that, but he's always pleasant, and he also sends Fitz a toy.
Multiple toys. A toy set. They're not new though. They're used toys.
Yeah, but they're probably his toys.
Yeah.
He said he found them in a closet somewhere.
Which is cute, but I thought it was just interesting that he doesn't really go out of his way to give Fitz too much. He just gives him little things that don't I don't know,
I think he went out of his way to give him those toys, or they were Chivalry's toys.
Yeah.
Or Chivalry told him to give those toys because we know that they had letters back and forth.
Yeah.
Patience had some of those letters when we meet her later. And it says that there was a message from Verity that said he had found them in a corner of his clothing chest and thought that Fitz might enjoy them, which is a complete lie.
Right.
You're not going to have old toys in the corner of a clothing chest if you're the king in waiting, and you're not going to find them and like, oh, hey, I'll send this to this kid down in the stables.
True. Also,
I bet he had to look for him.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But it also says that I cannot think of any other possession I ever valued more.
Yeah, because he really respects Verity. I mean,
I think that's his only gift that he's gotten ever. A toy.
Yeah.
I think it's his first toy.
Yeah. At least that we know of, because we don't know, his life before this. But yeah. Yeah. And he gets, I don't know, it's really sad that nobody's given him at least a toy before this. He's, you would think that one of the first things you would do is like, oh, how do I keep a kid busy?
Right.
A toy.
Run around with the dogs.
Yeah.
Eat some meat. We get Hobb as another danger zone in here. And there's a lot of resentment and jealousy directed at Fitz through this whole chapter.
Yeah.
From multiple sources. Hobb, Regal, there's a couple other people later in the chapter who show up. And
with Hobb, I kind of understand, because he does say he feels like Fitz is...
He's kind of stepping in his place.
Yeah. And that would be hard. I mean, he's only a few years older than Fitz. He's like 4 years older or something. And he's never overtly cruel. So at least he's not, acting like the 21-year-old that's shoving Fitz out of his path.
Yeah, he's just a boy. He wants Burrich as a father figure as well, and wants that more direct tutelage and care from Burrich. And I feel like what's been described in this chapter so far, Fitz became Burrich's right-hand man and did all of his fetching and always was by his side. So yeah, I can definitely see Hobb feels pushed out a little bit.
But also, at the end of the paragraph talking about Hobb, Fitz says, but I could sense his distaste for me and avoided him. And I think he senses a lot about people in here.
Yeah. Another evidence of the wit that he's kind of unconsciously using.
Yes.
He understands it a little bit more now, and it's mentioned a couple times that he's kind of aware of what he's doing, but at the same time, he doesn't try to control it at all. He just does it.
Yeah, it's just a natural thing.
And this is where the men-at-arms and the soldiers come in. Fitz is very comfortable around them, but Burrich disapproves of him going there.
Which is interesting, that he never forbids Fitz from going there. He just doesn't like it.
Which is kind of curious to me, because Burrich was a soldier. He is a soldier. I'm just wondering if, since he's taking over direct tutelage of Fitz, he doesn't want them to be around rowdy people who don't have the best of manners, or if it's just he doesn't think that somebody of the royal blood should be mingling with them.
No, because Verity mingles with them, and I don't think Burrich thinks Verity's lesser.
Oh, right.
I feel like maybe there might be some resentment harbored between Burrich and the men-at-arms, because Burrich can't be a soldier anymore.
True.
He can't be one of them anymore. And I'm sure that we know later for sure that they're talking bad about him. So, I mean, maybe he just doesn't, he's angry at them. It's one of those things like when something's taken away from you and you just you feel anger and you don't know where to place it. So maybe some of his anger is at the soldiers because he can't do that anymore. And so I feel like maybe that's more why he doesn't want Fitz. And that's why he's not really telling him he can't go in there, because he knows that Fitz should learn something from them. But yeah. And maybe it is also because they're all rowdy and aren't really the best people to be around if you're a child.
But he does say that for every hour he spent with them, there were multiple days he didn't go back. So he was kept very busy with Burrich, doing random chores, and then at night not talking and just watching Burrich put together poultices, stitching, harnesses, saddles, making medicine for the animals, that sort of thing.
Right.
And he learned a lot. This happened for 2 years and a better part of a third.
Mm-hmm.
So from about 6.5, he's now just about 10 years old.
Yeah.
And we get the next big section here where he's playing in the Great Hall. It's after a big feast or something like that. And I'm just rereading this. I'm just reminded that Buckkeep is a backwater fortress. They really don't have nice amenities for anything because there's still a bunch of food on all the tables.
Right.
None of it was cleaned up. There are dogs that picked up scraps from the tables and are eating in the corners.
Uh-huh.
There's no decorations throughout Buckkeep, basically. It's described as a lot of stone.
Mm-hmm. There's reeds on the floor.
Fitz and puppies are playing underneath the tables and just grabbing from the tables and eating under there, and that's generally allowed.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a weird juxtaposition with the image I always have in my head of Buckkeep as like, oh, this is the center of the story. It's a it's a castle, it's a kingdom.
It's a big, impressive castle.
And it's really just a stone room with, a bunch of animals running through it.
Yes. Yeah.
Not very clean.
I'm sure it's cleanish.
Cleanish, yeah, sure.
So Fitz is plundering food with the dogs with several puppies, which sounds like a great morning, if you ask me. And we see that he notes that he's not trying to get close to any of the dogs, even though he wants to, and he doesn't understand why Burrich thinks it's so bad. But he specifically says, I would not risk the life of a puppy to dispute it with him. So I think it's pretty noble that even though he's so lonely and he's craving a connection and dogs just come the most naturally to him, he's not letting himself connect to any of the dogs just because he would rather not let one another die just to have a little bit less loneliness for a time. So I thought that was a little sweet, if not super sad.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
That's most of these books.
Yep.
A little sweet, a lot of sad, Backdrop of sadness.
Yep.
And he hears some footsteps and darts out to grab some more food in case it's the servants clearing away the extra food. Which is a great move.
Right. It's smart. But it's not servants.
It's the old king, his grandfather, and a step behind him, Regal.
Who doesn't look put together for once.
Yeah. And the king's new fool on there as well. So we get an introduction to 2 new characters. Mm-hmm. We've heard about both of them. Well, this is the first time we heard about the fool.
Yes.
But we knew he popped in earlier.
Yeah.
But we've heard about the king before, and this is our first introduction to Shrewd in the first person rather than through other people.
Right.
And I just want to go into some ages before we dive into what they talk about. Mm-hmm. It says, the old king, my grandfather himself. And I got a few of these ages from Reddit with the help of some usernames I'll point out here. So if you assume that Shrewd had chivalry when he was about 18 or so, 18 or 20.
Sure.
And then chivalry had Fitz when he was 20. Then Shrewd would be 38 years older than Fitz. And Fitz's age is about 9 at the youngest. So Shrewd has to be at least like 47 right now. It's like 47 to 50, something like that.
Right.
And I want to thank Matt Gopak on Reddit. There were comments 2 years ago on reddit.com/Robin Hobb that helped me out, like kind of figure that out as well. And if you think about the Fool's Age, there was a conversation between Liveship Paragon, great username, and become an astronaut. In a conversation I read as well that helped me kind of backtrack on that. So in The Tawny Man, he mentions to Fitz and Night Eyes that he is older than both of them combined.
Right.
At the time, Fitz is about 35. Night Eyes is about 16 to 18.
Wow, okay. So he's like real old.
Yeah. I mean, there is like a 15-year gap between the end of Assassin's Quest and the beginning of Tawny Man. So at that time, the Fool has to be about 50-ish, at least 50. And that makes him about, again, Night Eyes' age, older than Fitz, about 16 to 18 years older. So at this time, the Fool is almost as old as Burrich was originally when he got Fitz. He's about 25 at the very least.
That's such a weird thought.
I know. I know.
Because he has like a child's body right now. Because the whites, we know,
are
age
long-lived,
slowly.
They age slowly, yeah. Because Prill Cop, when we meet him, is what, like 800 years old, 900 years old, something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. But it was really... I didn't think about that before, but I kind of went digging for it, and I found these threads, and it was really interesting to see that he's 25, about at least 25, because he could be older than both of them combined at the in the Tawny Man trilogy, and that just creates a discrepancy there.
Yeah.
So he's at least 25, probably older.
What a strange thought.
Yeah, and there's also I think an error on Robin Hobb's part here.
Oh.
It says the king's new fool, but recently acquired. And Fitz has been at Buckkeep for about 3 years-ish. Right. I mean, a little bit less than 3 years. And later on, in the very last book that Robin Hobb has written in Assassin's Fate, the Fool implies that he put the thought that quote, don't give away what you can't use right now in case you can't use it later, or something like that we mentioned in the first episode.
Don't do what you can't undo until you think about what you can't do once it's already done.
Yeah, that's actually way closer than what I had.
I'm sure it's not right either, but
that's really close, actually, I think. But Shrewd says that to Regal about Fitz in like the first chapter of this book. And in the last book, Robin Hobb writes that the Fool kind of gave that idea to King Shrewd. So he had to at least have been around for 3.5 years or so at Buckkeep.
Yeah.
And in my eyes, that's not really newly acquired.
Well,
because he would have been around before Fitz even came to Buck.
In defense of Robin Hobb, it could just be that publicly he's newly acquired. Although I guess he does tell Fitz in that book that you were talking about that he came to the castle trying to pretend that he was a gift from some other land.
Right.
But so I guess people would have had to have seen him then. But maybe he just like newly started walking around, so it was new to Fitz.
Possibly.
Or it's just a mistake.
we do know there's an interview out there where Robin Hobb said that the Fool had one line in her outlines, and he wasn't like an actual character until she actually started writing, and he became more interwoven with everything. So I'm wondering if it might just be a byproduct of that, where she wanted him introduced and like, oh, this is the newly acquired Fool. And then kind of as it went on, she realized how important he was and kind of made him say those quotes.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think that it doesn't quite line up with what we know of when he arrived.
Fair enough.
And I don't feel like doing mental gymnastics to say, oh, he was there, but hiding in the shadows kind of thing. So
yeah, that's fair.
For me, I think it's just a slight error. Not too bad. Just a little comment.
Yeah.
But it has a description of him where he's super pale, he's in black and white motley, and
he was so strange a creature.
So strange a creature. We get King Shrewd talking to Regal, and I sectioned off this quote here that throughout these whole pages, King Shrewd is desperately trying to teach Regal about leadership and kingship and ruling in general. And some of that, Regal is King Shrewd's favorite, kind of comes through here. I'm sure Shrewd taught his sons about ruling, and I'm sure he taught chivalry a lot. But you never really see these one-on-one conversations between him and Verity ever.
Yeah.
And this is like the only teaching that we see Shrewd doing, and it's desperately trying to get through Regal's hungover skull of how to use everything that you're given.
I wonder if the reason that people think that he is the favorite is because he's doing all this teaching, but I think that Shrewd is a clever person, and he knows the type of woman that Regal's mother is and can tell that his mother has had a big influence on who he's becoming. And so maybe he didn't always care too much about what Regal was doing, and now realizes that maybe to a young man getting it in his head that he deserves to be king more than the other people who are in line is a little bit too dangerous, and he needs to try to change that course before it gets too far.
That's also definitely true, because that comes out in another page or two as well. There's more quotes to support that.
Yeah. And just
yeah.
Regal, my mother, the queen, will hear about this farcier.
So Shrewd tries to get Regal to consider everything given to him. Says an opportunity presents itself and someone seizes it, often someone young or someone driven by the energies and hungers of youth. Royalty has no leisure to ignore such opportunities or to let them be created for others. And he's obviously talking right after Fitz jumps out from underneath the table and startles him. He's talking about Fitz at Regal, and then kind of whirls around and commands Regal to look at Fitz and says, "What will you make of him?" And Regal is very confused, and he's like, "It's the Fitz, not even Fitz, the Fitz. It's just the title. Chivalry's bastard, sneaking and thieving as always." And he thinks that chivalry is there to steal whatever the royalty can give him, because that's what his mother told him, I bet. So King Shrewd says the fool, and we get the fool standing next to him, like smiling up at him because he thinks he's being addressed, but we know he's calling Regal a fool. And there's a really long paragraph here. There's a lot of that I want to read out, but I will read most of this quote here as well, because it really shows the depth of what Shrewd is. He is shrewd. Like, he fully lives up to that magic farcier name, where he is a very crafty individual and has gotten this far by being incredibly intelligent. "Are your ears stopped with wax? Do you hear nothing I say? I asked you not, what do you make of him, but what will you make of him? There he stands, young, strong, and resourceful. His lines are every bit as royal as yours, for all that he was born on the wrong side of the sheets. So what will you make of him? A tool? A weapon? A comrade? An enemy? Or will you leave him lying about for someone else to take up and use against you?" And Regal is just, he's so confused by this. It's like he's only a kid. And the king's like, yeah, he can learn a lot right now.
Well, also, I think it's interesting that the king points out that Fitz is just as royal as you, Regal. Like, you are not any better than him. The only difference is you're legitimate and he's not. And I think he was trying to get him to understand that, like, he's not any better than his brothers either. Like, there's no such thing as, like, you're not better because your mom was a duchess before this. Like, if your mom had you out of wedlock, you'd be just the same as Fitz there. I just think that Regal probably missed that, but maybe didn't. The little dig that Fitz is just as royal as you.
This is where I think Regal's hatred of Fitz really sinks in, because he's embarrassed by the king right in front of Fitz, and he doesn't like that.
True.
And Shrewd continues on saying he could be a henchman, a diplomat. He could be used in hostage exchanges, marital alliances, quiet work, the diplomacy of the knife. And basically says he's royal blood, but he's not of the royal family. He can be used for anything. Shrewd sees Fitz as a tool first and family second.
Yes. It's
not because he's a mean guy, but it's because he's shrewd. He literally lives up to his name.
Right.
And Regal is finally kind of getting into his head like, oh, we're actually discussing this. Why are you saying this right in front of him that you're going to use him?
Yeah. Well, because Regal is a man of just kind of, I don't want to say trickery, but just kind of backstabby, go behind the back, talk crap about people when they're not around. He does everything.
He's very insidious.
Yes. He doesn't ever do anything face on. He's never just outright with what he wants or what he wants you to do for him. And so he cannot fathom why his father would straight up be like, yeah, no, we could totally use this kid. He's like, you can't say that part out loud, Dad.
And he's like, of course I'm saying it out loud. This kid's going to remember this.
Yeah.
I hope he remembers this. Because I want him to understand why I'm about to train him in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the full scene of Shrewd giving him the pin, making him promise that he would come to him if anyone tried to buy him or anything like that.
Feels like not very legally binding because he's a minor without his parent present.
It's closest kin, grandfather, you know. He drew a pin from the folds of silk at his throat and solemnly pushed it through the simple wool of my shirt. Now you are mine, he said, and made that claiming of me more important than any blood we shared. Just
quick side note. Has he always worn this pin, or that's just what he had on him today? Was he waiting for the opportunity to give it to Fitz?
I don't think it was ever intended for Fitz.
He just I need something. Ah, perfect. I'm wearing a pin. Here you go.
I mean, the king's gotta have manservants. He probably set out a full outfit for him, and it kind of matched what he was wearing, whatever cape he was wearing that day.
Right.
So, yeah, and now the king has given him this. He's made Fitz promise to come to him if he needs anything, that sort of thing, kind of binding him to his needs. Like, I am responsible for you now, but you have to come to me if there's any issues, and I will fix it for you. Kind of buys him. But this whole time, they're staring each other in the eyes. They are sizing each other up. And this is a 9-year-old kid with his grandfather kneeling in front of him, giving him a pin, making him promise these things. And his grandfather is skilling at him as well.
Yeah. And we don't know exactly what he skilled.
I was just going to ask, what do you think he did?
I feel like he skilled loyalty into Fitz. Maybe not for the whole bloodline. Maybe just for himself or the king. So that whoever's king doesn't have to worry about Fitz turning around and literally stabbing them in the back. But I also wonder if it was just kind of like a feeling of fulfillment. Like feeling like, yeah, this is my purpose. And that's why he finds it so hard later to get out of being an assassin or being the king's tool. Because he struggles with that his whole life, that he doesn't want this, but he can't stop doing things
right
that are what he was trained to be. And so I wonder if it was partially that, just to become a tool for the king.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it's a full, you will do this now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's too blunt for King Shrewd. King Shrewd is the last one to be fully trained at the skill.
Right.
And he's extremely subtle. And it says that Fitz, that was the first time he was manipulated by the skill at the hands of a master.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was more Shrewd entering his mind, feeling out all of his thoughts as he agreed, and kind of directing them into positive thoughts, like you said, and reinforcing those promises, but also just getting a sense of who Fitz was in the seconds that he was agreeing and listening to that.
Yeah. And I think maybe the regret then that Fitz senses could be maybe a sense of feeling bad that this kid is so earnest and actually a really good person and probably just would have done it if he would have asked normally. And like, because, you know, he's just a good-natured person and or maybe it's regret because he knows that Fitz is so good-natured and now he's going to ask him to kill people. So
my first thought, because the quote is, he said softly, and I sensed a trace of regret in his voice and wondered what it was for. My first thought was that he kind of regretted having to skill at a family member to secure these promises. But now that I'm thinking about it, it might be just the regret of letting go of the skill. Because that is a huge loss. Feeling connected, like they talk about it later in the books, and it just might be Shrewd doesn't get to use the skill very often, and then he finally kind of sunk into the skill stream. He's connected to everyone around him, and then he just lets it go, and he's like, okay. I don't know.
Interesting.
It's just another thought.
I like that. Huh.
But Regal becomes very sulky after this, and he doesn't really approve. And then he brings his mother in.
He doesn't ever say he doesn't approve.
Yeah.
He just says, my mother, the queen, would not approve. So.
Yeah.
So that means he doesn't approve, but he won't say that.
Favoring the boy will only make it appear you recognize him. It will give him ideas and others. And the king fully shrugs off any of the queen's bad judgments or thoughts or anything.
He specifically says, I scarcely notice it anymore, Regal.
Yeah, she will flap and squawk.
Like, I don't care if your mom's mad, okay? I'm the king.
Which is a shortcoming on his part.
Yes, that is true. He's underestimating her.
Yes, severely underestimating her. She is the one that poisons chivalry. Or kills chivalry. I shouldn't say poison because we don't know.
Yeah.
How he died technically, but
yeah. No, he specifically says that her ambitions have always exceeded her abilities. In royalty, that is the most lamentable failing.
Yes. And that is double-edged sword talking about her and pointedly looking at Regal while he's saying that. Do not let your ambitions exceed your abilities. My youngest third son.
Who is not going to get my throne. Like, ugh.
But he also acknowledges, like, Regal is so stupid in this conversation.
Right.
The king is talking about how the queen has these treasonous thoughts and wants to become a duchess of Tillith and Pharaoh, and they'll rise up against the kingdom. And Regal adds in, and I as king after her. And it just admits right out there that he has also been kind of indoctrinated against the Six Duchies kingdom and the King Shrewd. And he's like, yes, I thought she had planted such festering treason in your mind.
Like, what? I just don't understand.
He has the best teachers. How is he this dumb and this petty?
But also,
his mom must be so bad.
So horrible.
I'm so glad we don't get to see her in the books.
I know. She's got to be trash. But, like, how... I just don't understand how he is able to continue living. Or, you know, like, they have the assassin shade is in the wall somewhere. Like, they know that Regal is literally having treason talks with his mom. Like, they're talking about him becoming king instead of the rightful heir. Like... How is that not a threat to the whole royal family? And I don't know. I just feel like he's such a threat this whole time, and they could have nullified it way earlier. And instead, he just gets to continue. There's no punishment. He doesn't, I mean...
He's still family.
Yeah.
Verity says that too in a couple parts in the series, where Fitz wants to kill Regal, and Verity's like, don't do that. Help me. Don't kill Regal. Like,
but also, if, like, Shade or Fitz were to, you know, do something like that, or say, I could be king if I got enough supporters from this area, like, they would be killed. And so why is it any different if Regal, the third born of a second wife...
because he has value. Chivalry is now abdicated. He's no longer of the royal family. Regal is the one that can be married off for agreements, and he can be a diplomat.
Why doesn't he just want to get married off to be a king somewhere else? Like,
because he wants this land. This land is rightfully his.
It just, I don't know. Regal just makes me very angry.
And then they walk away. The king and Regal and the Fool walk away, but before they completely close the door, the Fool looks back, waggles his tongue, does a little gesture with his hands, and then...
What do you think the gesture is?
I don't know, honestly. He gives him the middle finger.
No, I don't think it's that. I like to think that it's like, you know, like the double hand bird where you like flap maybe or something. I don't know.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know.
That's like a weird gesture, and that's what I always picture, I guess.
But it says that he waggles his tongue, and that the Fool does that a couple times. And if you remember in the last series, Bee has trouble talking, and she has to follow her dreams to get her tongue cut, basically, and loose so she can speak like regular, the common language of the Six Duchies, I should say.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just evidence that the Fool has had that done in the past, that his tongue is free. It's just kind of like a passing thought.
Interesting.
He must have had that too, because he's also a white. She was a white.
Yeah.
Like, they had the same physiology.
Yeah. I like that train of thought.
And since he's, 25 years old at least, he had to have it when he was a kid. So.
Yeah, true. Weird. But as they walk off, I thought it was pretty funny that instead of doing anything about what just happened, Fitz just runs over and stuffs his shirt full of sweet cakes. He's like, well, that was weird. All right, sweet cakes time.
Yep. Man after my own heart. So he goes back to Burrich's house, and it kind of comes to a head where Burrich's like, oh gosh, you brought attention to yourself. Now it's all happening. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Burrich is kind of scared at the future now.
Yeah.
It says in the early chapter that both of them had fallen into a rhythm, that both of them had gotten used to life, that both of them had become comfortable with one another and what they were doing, and now there's a whole wrench in it. Everything's going to change. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of reflects in a couple of the times that Burrich speaks. And the first time is like, he's silent and just focuses all of his attention on Fitz, and he's like, so you did this. Things are going to be different. Yeah.
And of course, he starts with talking about the horse.
Yep, of course. of course, the horse. And he gets to ride Sooty later on and gets trained up in horses. And then Burrich talks about how he'll have to talk more in general.
Yep.
And that he's going to get tutored and also learn a man's way of controlling beasts and how to use hound dogs and things like that.
Ain't nothing but hound dog.
And then he's going to learn swords as well and weapons in general. And Burrich says he's not a man to displease, talking about the king, let alone cross. Wisest course of all is not to have him notice you, but I didn't warn you about that, and now it's too late. And then he pauses, clears his throat, and suddenly takes a breath and says, there's another thing that's to change. You're going to have a room to yourself in the keep.
Yeah, and then he tries to be like,
brush it off.
Brush it off like it's not a big deal to him.
Yeah.
Like he finally gets his privacy back, and he just wants to make it seem like it's a good thing, and like he's okay with it because he's the adult and has to make it seem better for the child.
Yeah, and Fitz is like, I don't want a room up there. Burrich says, well, you're taking the room because the king was giving it to you.
Well, whenever he says I don't want a room, he's like, oh, so you can speak. Like,
yeah, he says, Fitz talks again, like the second or third line. The second line besides yes, sir.
Yes.
And Burrich lifted his eyes and regarded me sternly. My, positively chatty tonight, aren't we? Literally 2 lines. How quiet is that room for the past 3 years?
Right?
At night.
Burrich's too awkward to try to make conversation with Fitz because he feels bad about getting Nosy away from him.
Yeah.
And so he's not going to he thinks I'll let Fitz come to me, but Fitz is like, I don't need to talk. I'll just sit here and listen to your feelings all night, buddy.
But they go back and forth that Fitz isn't a stray pup, Burrich's not a stray pup, but the stray pup got sent along with a familiar thing, an old shirt. Why do I have to have all this change all of a sudden?
And I think it's sad because Fitz really thinks that Burrich didn't try to stand up for him, or Burrich doesn't care that he's leaving. And I think that's more why Fitz is upset a little bit. Maybe not more, but he's a little bit upset that Burrich doesn't seem to care. And then Burrich has to like try not to be like, of course I don't want you to leave, because he would never spill his feelings, because feelings aren't for men. What? But
yeah, he says like, you can come and sleep here once in a while if it feels too empty in the keep. And pretty much everything in those pages, I just want to point out, was describing Fitz as a puppy or a dog.
Yeah.
That just kind of continues. That's their relationship. It's a puppy and a master.
He's been taking care of Fitz for almost 3 years now.
Yep.
And I'm sure he's come to love Fitz.
Oh, yeah.
Because how could you not? First of all, Fitz is amazing, even if he's a little
precious
dense.
Little boy.
But I don't know. Fitz treats the animals well, and he's a quick learner, and he tries to, work. It doesn't seem like he needs too much scolding to do what he needs to be doing. And Fitz came at a time when everything was changing and nothing was really constant or steady. And then he had Fitz.
And now it's gotten steady again, and now it's changing again.
Yeah.
So, just rocking the boat. I don't have too much specifically over the next few pages. Is there anything you want to touch on? Do you want me to do a quick rundown until he gets to a certain...
So I just want to say that I think it's really funny that the next morning when he gets up, he gets tubbed and scrubbed.
True.
I had to point that line out because I laughed at that, and I just tubbed and scrubbed. That's what I'm gonna say anytime I need to get ready for work. Like, gotta go get tubbed and scrubbed. I don't know. I just thought
like how it's a significant event that he has to get.
Like, does he shower often?
Yeah.
Or I guess not shower. You don't shower.
He's a 10-year-old kid. He doesn't shower or bathe. Come on.
He should.
He's sitting with the soldiers and with Burrich and the horses and the leather and the oil smells and stuff.
Maybe that's why the kids in the keep didn't want to hang out with him. He just smells bad all the time. But I do think that it's interesting that whenever he gets to Sooty, he tries to conceal his disappointment because he's a young boy and he kind of wanted he's getting a horse. He's gonna get a big, strong steed. And then Burrich is like, you don't think she's much, do you? Well, how much of a horse did you have yesterday, Fitz?
It's such a parent thing.
It is such a parent thing. You're going to complain about this horse? You didn't have one yesterday. How are you going to complain? On what grounds?
So we got some training.
Mm-hmm. But I do want to quick point out that this is Cobb's horse.
Yeah.
Not only is this a horse, like just some random pregnant horse.
The horse that he was training.
Yes,
and
well,
took care of.
So Hobb didn't own the horse,
Right.
but Hobb had been training this horse for a really long time
Mm-hmm.
and is very upset. Understandably so.
He gets to start over with the foal that she has, but
Yeah.
still, that's another reason that resentment kind of just sinks in at multiple directions towards Fitz.
Yes. Also, Sooty doesn't seem to have knowledge of the wit or to really show any interest in making any sort of connection wit-wise, which hasn't happened to Fitz before, I assume, because he rides her blind and he doesn't know. It sounds like from the description that he hasn't had to deal with an animal not reciprocating the reach out before. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it said, her temperament and mine reminded me of a quiet pond. If she had thoughts, they were not about what we were doing. And Burrich was watching me too closely for me to try knowing her mind. So, yeah, he kind of kept himself to himself and just rode her blind because didn't want to get punished.
Yeah.
He got a horse at least.
Yeah.
But we have horse training. He's exhausted. They go to get food, and Burrich doesn't let him eat in the kitchens anymore. Nope. He has to sit at the table. And
which, what a drag. And Burrich sits next to him, but lower.
Yeah, it's on the same side, but lower on the table. So I don't know if they're directly next to each other. Actually, it doesn't. It doesn't say that they're directly next to each other. It has. Burrich nudged me to a place on the left side of the table, above the midpoint, but not by much. He himself ate on the same side, but lower. So they could be next to each other, but I don't even know if they're right next to each other.
That's fair. I guess I just assumed they would be sitting next to each other, but at least they're still within sight so that Burrich can, like, come to his rescue if he needs to.
But all the proprieties of a royal court, you have to take your rank and sit where you're supposed to. Mm-hmm. But they eat, and a errand boy Brant comes up to them and says he's going to take him to Hodd. Burrich straightens his hair and says Hodd's a harsher task. What's the actual word? A harsher, a master stricter than Burrich, because later Fitz doesn't know whether she's a woman or a man. He assumes that she's a man because it's learning swords. Yeah. And all that Fitz knows
and
is soldiers.
And then it's a woman. Heck yeah.
But he follows Brant, and Brant is very mean and very vindictive and jealous in general. Yeah. And very gossipy. And,
yeah, super gossipy. And then starts talking crap about Burrich. Yeah. And little Fitz is thrown off by that. Like, he's used to people talking bad about him.
Old game leg Burrich. Ugh.
Fitz says, the boy spoke as if Burrich's limp were something foolish he did for show. For some reason, I felt stung by his mockery. Yeah. Which is fair. I mean, he definitely... This is a father figure in his life, and this kid is making fun of him for a injury that he took nobly. Like, it's not like a fake thing that he's just doing.
Yeah, we get
fun.
We get the description that he saved Chivalry's life, but it's making fun of him while saying that he saved his life, and he calls Chivalry Shiv, and he's very disrespectful in general towards both of them. Yeah, and it's just very, very rude, and extremely jealous because he says all of a sudden you have to have arms training, and I have a horse too now, I hear.
Yeah, what's that for? Yeah. Okay, bud, back off. Like,
But Hodd steps in and kind of tells Brant off a little bit. And then...
It's so cool. She's so cool.
Yeah, she is very cool. And then kind of tries to learn what Fitz is made out of before the other students show up. And he's not very good, obviously. Yeah. He's a 10-year-old kid against a master and doesn't really know what he's doing.
Before she gets teaching him like what it is, I just wanted to point out that she like really gives it to Brant and is super, like, doesn't just take she's giving him a lesson, and whenever he's like, I think I understand, ma'am, she's like, oh, you think so? Guess I better talk a little bit simpler, you dumb idiot. But I just wanted to point out that she's, like, show off a little bit of her, because I think she's really cool.
Her inner steel, basically.
Yeah,
like
and isn't gonna take attitude from a boy or let him get away with being a jerk.
Yeah, a 12-year-old boy or however old Brant is. I don't think we see Brant beyond this chapter again, but I'm going to keep an eye out for him and see if he's changed at all, because, man.
Ugh.
Yeah, we get our introduction to Hodd, and she says, boy, what are you called? And Fitz replies, Burrich calls me Fitz, and she flinches and kind of recoils a little bit. And that's the second time this chapter where we get somebody asking his name, Fitz replying Fitz, and people kind of being like, what? So while Fitz does mean illegitimate son of, it seems like it's kind of directly meaning that derogatory term.
Yeah.
And Burrich is just calling him that. And that's kind of what Fitz takes on as his name ever after, though.
Yeah.
So he kind of wears it, not with pride, because it still hurts him.
Mm-hmm.
I know later on it still says, like, hearing, oh, you're chivalry's bastard, kind of hurts him still.
Yeah.
But Fitz itself has the sting taken out of, because that's his name.
Yeah. It's a way to take ownership of a situation he's been thrust into.
Yeah. But he gets an exercise of a lifetime. He rode horses all the morning, ate, fought all afternoon, and he's exhausted. Gets taken by Brant again and shown various corridors of the palace, the fortress.
I like the little line where he finds out later that Brant has no idea what the king's quarters look like, because that's for higher up lackeys. The like little subtle dig at Brant even all these years later. Like, this jerk, he wasn't even that important. But yeah, Brant seems to be pretty pleased that Fitz gets a room that
hasn't been used in a long time. Yeah.
Ugh. Which also, how big is Brant's room? Like, it's probably still smaller than whatever Fitz has. So
he's
but
jealous. It says in there earlier when he drops Fitz off at Hodd, it says, there was something more than jealousy in his tone. I have since come to know that many men always see another's good fortune as a slight to themselves, which describes Brant, to a T.
True.
Fitz does eventually recognize that. But at the moment, it's just very cruel to a 10-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Not quite 10-year-old boy, as it's said in here.
He's almost 10.
He's almost 10. 10 and 3/4, or 9 and 3/4. So he gets to his new room, and this is the room that he has throughout the rest of his time at Buckkeep here. Mm-hmm. And we get a little introduction to King Wisdom's tapestry as well.
Yeah.
I could make out a gleaming and winged creature of some sort, and a kingly personage in supplication before it. I was later informed it was King Wisdom being befriended by the elderling.
Do you think that this is an illustrative way trying to show King Wisdom giving himself into the dragon? He's like...
Maybe, but I think...
Just poorly done. It's the artist's first day. He doesn't really know how to do the, like, concepts without being... He's trying a new style.
Right. Yeah. He was a Baroque painter, but now he's trying Cubism, and it's just not quite, working out. No, I think it's later explained. This is just a thought that's sticking in my head. I don't know if it's actually said in the books or not, or if I just think this is headcanon. But I'm pretty sure because King Wisdom carved a stone dragon, and he said he was going up here to, like, find elderlings to help. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the same thing as Verity's story, where no one really knows what he did.
Right.
And when the dragon flew over and they said those were the elderlings, they're still taking memories from the people that they fly over.
Yeah.
They're not flying over as much, so they don't take as much, but I think that story got obfuscated in general and just got confused.
That's fair. That is fair, because everybody thinks that Verity died in battle.
Yeah. He
So-
died finding them, but like, or
No.
there's two stories. I think one, he died finding them and agreed that they would help, and the other one that he
'Cause people
agreed to stay as long as they helped the 6 duchies or something like that.
I just remember that there's like people remember him stepping off of a dragon, like he was riding a dragon and he stepped off of it to do something. So like I remember that one of the stories people like think they saw him, which isn't possible.
But that's also the main point, is that there are
Yeah.
multiple stories and no one really knows the whole thing.
Right.
And they call it befriending the elderling. And obviously this is a picture of a dragon and not an elderling in general. Mm-hmm. It's just the whole story is confused, and that's
Right.
honestly the main point of this first trilogy
Yeah.
is to introduce us to those concepts.
Yeah. Do you think, just a random thought, but do you think elderlings still existed around the time of King Wisdom, or do you think that there was like writing about them and so they knew? Because how did they know the name the elderlings? Because that's really what they're called. So like, were there just a few left and they were dying?
I think so. I think at that point, I think the earthquake that sundered Kelsingra had happened, that it broke that city and some fled. But I think King Wisdom had older documents of people carving the skill stone.
Right. Yeah, because it would have been in the skill scrolls.
Yeah, in
later.
general, those
Yeah.
stone dragons and things like that. So I think he had knowledge of the elderlings, or at least knew of them. I don't think he ever met any of them, but they knew that happened, that they could carve dragons, because the old counting song, "The Hill to Jampe," and it's talking about all the coteries going up and carving the skill stones later. Wisdom is one of those. And there must have been other stories and other coteries that went with them later.
Because there's that whole field.
Yeah.
Of them,
And I mean,
right.
later coteries, Kettle is from a later coterie. They went to carve a dragon without Kettle, but they went to carve a dragon. So I feel like they did know about, at the very least, that was a thing that they could do to help. And I'm guessing that they got most of that knowledge from maybe ancient scrolls mentioning that the elderlings were also skilled in manipulating the stone and skill in general. That's my thoughts anyway. I think Wisdom had some knowledge.
Fair. Okay.
We just get a quick description of Fitz's room and how he goes to bed, basically. Is there anything you want to touch on in these last couple pages?
I just want to talk about how Fitz is like excited to own a chair and a bench with a cushion. I thought that was kind of cute and a little sad, just that it's a place that's all his, which he's never had before.
Yeah, and he's kind of thinking about what Burrich would be doing down in the stables, but he's also way too exhausted to stay up and think about that consistently. So,
and he misses the smell of stuff, which is kind of dog-like. But I mean, I probably wouldn't want to sleep somewhere that smelled like dank stone and dust. So,
I mean, to be fair, I also wouldn't want to sleep in a place that smelled like leather, oil, and Burrich himself, because Burrich probably stinks.
True.
If Fitz got tubbed and scrubbed, well, they do have the saunas.
That's true. Which is
those would be pretty
and
nice.
I can't imagine that Burrich would like have bad hygiene.
Probably not good, but probably not bad.
No. I guess. I mean, he has to take care of his animals, and washing animals is like a good practice. So hopefully he would also.
Who knows? And Fitz, at the end of this chapter, says he idly wished for something else, for any situation that was neither this forsaken chamber nor the tenseness of Burrich's room, for a restfulness that perhaps I had once known somewhere else, but could no longer recall. And he went into oblivion. He fell asleep.
Yeah.
And that's what Fitz is chasing his whole life, I think.
Yeah.
Is that feeling of restfulness. That's why he has a cabin in the middle of the woods near Forge
Yeah.
later on in the series, that's what he wants. He doesn't want to be a tool. He doesn't want to have some place that people are resentful and jealous of him. He just wants to be there
Yeah.
and exist. He's looking for his wolf. He wants to live in the present.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that happens over this chapter. It spans 3 years for him, basically,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of change. It's a very quick introduction to Fitz. We start with him just 2 chapters ago at 6 years old and getting introduced to Burrich and Verity, and now he's starting to get trained and lives in the keep. So, quick transitions.
Yeah. To show us more of what is coming later and what he becomes. And I don't know, I just really like the way that we see how he finds a rhythm. Every time it feels like he finds a rhythm, everything kind of changes.
Yeah.
And
that continuously happens.
Yep.
Honestly.
Yeah.
I feel it's pretty reminiscent of real life too. I mean, things always happen to change your situation at the present.
Mm-hmm.
Take our current situation.
Yeah.
But we're making the best of it, making more episodes. So,
yeah.
Do you think Fitz is content in this chapter? There's a lot of time to cover here.
Yeah.
Is he happy?
Ooh, I don't know. I want to say no. I think there are probably, I mean, it's 3 years. There's no way that he doesn't feel happiness even once.
Oh, sure. I mean, he gets to hang out with his friends once in a while. He gets to play with dogs and learn about animals.
But he never feels a bond with anyone. He doesn't ever feel like he belongs. And in one part, somewhere, it says that he doesn't love Burrich, that he respects Burrich.
He depends on him.
Depends on Burrich.
Comfortable there.
Yes, but he doesn't love him. And I just feel like, you know, somebody who is missing that in their life probably isn't overall very happy.
It's kind of like what we said earlier in the episode, that this whole series is a background of sadness with bursts of happiness. And I feel like that's this chapter too. It's just a background of sadness, and he gets momentary bursts of good things happening to him, like eating a bunch of pies,
but even
meat
that
from the festival, and then getting a stomach ache.
Stomach ache all day long, which is such a little kid thing to happen. Just like, oh, I'm gonna eat all this Halloween candy, and now I'm gonna be sick for 2 days.
Thank you for joining us for chapter 3. Look forward to hearing from you guys on all of our social media. We're at IsFitzHappy on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Yeah, and if you want to contact us more directly, you can email us at isfitshappy@gmail.com.
Of course, and feel free to check out our website, subscribe to any of your favorite podcasts, apps.
So you can listen to our beautiful voices.
Yes. We're at isfitshappy.com.